There's nothing wrong, quote unquote, wrong with the brain or broken about the brain in depression. It's a pattern that arises from circuits that we all have. And there are so many tools that we can use to start to change the activity and chemistry of those circuits to utilize the dynamics of the brain to go up instead of being continually stuck.
Welcome to the Emotional Longevity Podcast. My name is Dr. Elisha Goldstein. Have you ever noticed how your mind can spiral? One small worry turns into a loop of stress, and suddenly you're stuck in your head, and probably for a while. Today, we're talking about what's actually happening in your brain when that spiral takes hold, and how tiny actions can start to pull you into a place that you might consider to be a better place. My guest is Dr. Alex Korb. He's a neuroscientist, author of The Upward Spiral, now in its second edition, and one of the leading voices helping people understand the simple, science-based shifts that lift mood, motivation, and emotional balance. We get into why even the most intelligent among us, or if we identify as that, sometimes struggle the most, and how self-criticism keeps the loop alive, and the small, practical steps that can literally rewire the brain towards more calm and connection. So whether you felt stuck with anxiety, burnout, or just want to strengthen your emotional foundation, this conversation will give you the real hope and tools you can use today. Okay, we'll get into that now. Alex Korb, welcome to the Emotional Longevity Podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start off by exploring some of the basics here. You do such an incredible job at exploring we're talking about really the neuroscience of depression, anxiety, the downward spirals of them all. And also not just that, really the practical steps we can take to begin to come out of that. What's happening in the brain when someone feels stuck in that downward spiral or that low mood of depression or anxiety?
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of parts of that, actually. One is the trigger into the downward spiral. And then there's this sort of the persistent pattern that keeps them stuck down. But the second part, the pattern that keeps you stuck is that the way the thinking part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and the feeling part of the brain, the limbic system, and the action part of the brain, the striatum, they're just reacting to each other in particular ways that make everything feel more negative than it actually is, or it basically makes your brain tend to think and act in ways that perpetuate the depression or the anxiety or wherever you're feeling stuck. But I'm happy to talk more about that as well. But I think one of the interesting parts is how that process starts to form in the first place, because I think we all have that, familiarity with the feeling, whether you have clinical depression or anxiety or burnout or not. We all have that familiarity where you start to spiral downward. It's just that some people are fortunate where they can get out of it, and other people, their brain gets stuck in this persistent pattern. But one of the things I realized, I don't think I've shared this on a podcast before, but one of the first pieces or stories in my own life where I started to recognize this downward spiral was in 7th or 8th grade, where I had this crush on this girl, and I wanted to talk to her so that she'd like me, but I felt awkward and stressed out, and because I wanted her to like me, and I was ooh, but now I'm tense and stressed, and I'm gonna be awkward, so she's not gonna like me, but I'm only tense and stressed because I'm worried that she's not gonna like me. But it's true, she is going to think I'm weird because I'm tense and shit. And I was getting stuck in this downward spiral. That's right. I don't know how to get out of it. But one of the things that helped me get out of it was the awareness of this is the pattern that I've gotten stuck in. And also I think my sense of humor of this is ridiculous. Like I have, because I'm worried about this thing, which was just a little small worry, like I somehow like made it more of a problem. Like the worry about it and the fear is valid, but like I've made it more of a problem and an obstacle than it needs to be.
Or your brain's making it more of a problem than an
Right.
obstacle.
No, at the time, I don't think I didn't, understand neuroscience as a eighth grader or whatever. But like now I'm like, oh, right. Like, but that's what I think back to a lot of times when, when I'm talking about downward spirals, that it's really just like a thought that pops into your head or something that someone says to you that like resonates with a particular memory that you have. Nothing wrong with that, except like, ooh, the way that your brain responds to that thought then changes the activity in other regions, which often makes you focus more on the negative, or you're more stressed out, which makes you more reactive to certain things. And then it just creates this series of effects that is, we often go on a roller coaster ride. For some people, it gets, so much that their brain kind of gets stuck in this pattern of depression. But this notion that, bad things that happen to you or negative thoughts trigger activity and chemistry of your brain that can make things worse, that is something we are all familiar with. And that happens simply because of the dynamics of the brain. Like that's just how your brain works. It's a positive feedback system, which means like, ooh, negative things create, negative changes and negative patterns of activity, which make you notice more negative. But the thing that I really was excited about later on, it was like, oh, but like the same inherent patterns of activity in the brain, like we can also use to like go in the opposite direction.
We'll get into that in a second. By the way, the story you had about going up to the girl and having that little, I had that exact same story in like sixth or seventh. I can't remember. We were on a long field trip. We were on the bus together. I was trying to get up the energy to go ask her out. And I had that whole like battle, that tug of war that was probably happening between my, whatever was formed in my prefrontal at the time in my limbic system, back and forth. And then all of a sudden I go up and I get the energy to do it. And I go to the seat in front of her. I turn around and I say, Amy, will you go steady with me? And she's like, well, I just got out of a relationship. I look back on that and I'm, and I was deflated, but I think my adrenals were kind of flushing at the same time.
Right. Well, the funny thing is like that same story, like I remembered a lot, like later on in like my, 20s when I was dating and like, oh, it's not quite the same intensity roller coaster ride as when you're in, seventh or eighth grade, but like, oh, you still feel nervous. And that was one of the things where the neuroscience was actually very helpful for me, was realizing like not everyone's brain is wired the same way. Like we have all the same circuits, they're all connected in basically the same way, but like the tuning of those circuits, how reactive those circuits are different for different people. And so I was like, oh, I have an emotionally reactive brain. I care about what other people think about me. Not everyone is the same. Some people are more narcissistic. They don't care about what other people think. And if you have the kind of brain that cares about what people think, well, then there's more inherent challenge in like talking to someone new or, trying to ask them out on a date because you're like, ooh, you're more perceptive and aware. They're like, I don't want to bother them. I don't want them to think or whatever. And it's a challenge that people who aren't either emotionally perceptive or emotionally reactive don't have. And it's like, So does that mean like, well, it's like easier for someone who's a jerk to be confident because they literally don't care about what people think about them. And that sucks because like we're all attracted to confidence. And so we think like, oh, you don't have to be a jerk. It's just, oh, if you have more emotional depth, you just need to realize like, oh, there are, that's just, I'm glad I have emotional depth. And like the thing that's making me more stressed out is because I'm, worried about what she thinks of me or whatever. But it's really like, that's a different part of your brain where you're too hard on yourself. And it doesn't mean you have to stop being someone who cares, who's like caring and emotional. No, you just need to stop, being so hard on yourself. And that's when I started to like sort of realize that like there are certain parts about your brain that are unique to you that you can't change, but you actually wouldn't want to because you like those parts about yourself. And those aren't usually the problem. It's usually some other, brain circuit and how it's connected that then makes that a problem. And you just need to, rewire that or calm it down a little bit. So it
sounds like there's some acceptance. There's something about acceptance in here. It reminds me of I interviewed a woman named Judith Orloff. I don't know, you might know who she is. And, she's made her whole life's work about, being an empath, which also being a highly sensitive person, which, this degree of acceptance has allowed her to more skillfully move through the world and develop boundaries when she needs to. And so it's almost like it opens up choices.
Yeah.
What inspired you to write The Upward Spiral? Was there something that happened for you? Was there a personal moment or some idea that clicked for you?
Yeah, there were numerous moments. I'm sure the fact that my mom was a psychiatrist, probably, and a psychoanalyst at that, probably influenced it. And I remember one of the early times thinking about the brain, like she would share tidbits that she had learned about, neuroscience. Oh, I read this interesting article, and like at the dinner table when I was a teenager. And that probably is one of the main things that set me on the path to like majoring in neuroscience. But early on, I remember her talking about how part of the reason that she became a psychoanalyst is she was like, in the 80s, everyone, there are all these people with depression, anxiety, that everyone's just like throwing medication at people. And she was like, maybe we should like try and get to the root cause of this and like see what's going on. And it wasn't until later when we were in high school where she kind of developed this like anti-medication view. Uh-huh. And later she realized like, oh, but actually like for some people, like antidepressants or other medication like helps them engage in the therapy. And if they didn't have that, then they wouldn't take those positive steps. Sort of like for some people with a physical injury, pain medication helps them do physical therapy. And that was one of the first moments where I started to see like, oh yeah, like talking about things can be really helpful. That's like one way we change the brain. Medication is another way of changing the brain. And that, I think, kind of set me on the path of being curious about taking a first neuroscience class in college. And then the more I learned about it, the more fascinated I became. But I think the real turning point that set me on the path to writing this book is a much sadder story that involves, strangely, the UCLA women's ultimate frisbee team. Because when after I majored in neuroscience and I started working at UCLA and the brain mapping center, and I loved playing ultimate frisbee in college. and I started coaching the newly formed UCLA Women's Ultimate Frisbee team, and it was an amazing experience. I'm still coaching. But there was this one girl on the team, she'd never played before, but she was like really athletic. She picked it up really well, really quickly. But something I couldn't quite understand about her, because she would just like be really inconsistent, miss practices. And she later revealed to me that she was suffering from depression and had been for many years. And it started to really change my perception of depression, because I had always assumed that, oh yeah, people are depressed when their lives are bad, like when bad things happen. And seeing her up close, I was like, what? But she's like really smart and talented and friendly. It's like it doesn't make sense. And unfortunately, this isn't a happy story, because she found the Ultimate team like very helpful for her. I encouraged her to come to practice, and that was definitely a positive part of her life. And she was in treatment and therapy and medication. But in the fall of her sophomore year, eventually she started withdrawing. It got worse and worse and became too much, and she ended up taking her own life. And it was very tragic and heartbreaking. But like these thoughts about like, well, there's like different pieces of it that are like changing your brain, and there's something that's going on that like you could have a good life, and yet something that's happening in your brain is like there's this disconnect where you don't get to experience it. And I felt very powerless. I was like, I'm glad I could be a part of this thing, this Ultimate Frisbee team that she found helpful, but I felt powerless. I was like, what are these psychiatrists and psychologists doing? Like, why couldn't they have fixed it? And so that's what propelled me into a PhD program, so I could study like what is going on, so I could one day help people like her. And I dedicated this book to her memory, because like in grad school, I was like, I didn't find what I thought I was looking for, which was like, well, there's got to be something about the brain that's wrong, that's broken in depression. You just need to scan the brain and find it and be like, hey, oh yeah, you have depression, and like you just need to snap out of it. Or like, oh, you need medication, but like you are fine and just need to go for a run or whatever. I thought like, we got to find what is broken about the brain. And what I discovered is like that just isn't a helpful way of thinking about it, and nor is it scientifically accurate. There's nothing wrong, quote unquote, wrong with the brain or broken about the brain in depression. It's a pattern that arises from circuits that we all have. And there are so many tools that we can use to start to change the activity and chemistry of those circuits, to utilize the dynamics of the brain to go up instead of being continually stuck. And I found that very helpful in my own life. Like looking back, I'm like, oh, maybe there are times like I was kind of depressed, and just like, well, what were the factors that were making me depressed? But what were the factors, either inherent or just by luck, that prevented me from sinking down deeper like she had, and that allowed me to escape? And I'm like, some of it is just luck, but like trying to understand like, what are those different things, and which of those things can you actually change and utilize? And I wanted to share that information with the people who use it most.
Well, breakdown earlier you were talking about, I mean, by the way, that's an incredibly tragic story. And there's too many of those tragic stories. In fact, in that age group right now, if you look at any kind of more recent report, you'll see that those rates of anxiety and depression have gone up in that age group.
Yeah. And I think something for me, I realized is like was particularly poignant is like these people who we hear about like, oh, but they were great or whatever. And we had no idea how much they were struggling on the inside. And I think that has always like fascinated me. And because it's heartbreaking because like we have this belief like, oh, well, if you could just like, work hard and get ahead, like if your life is good, then like you should feel it and enjoy it. And there's something that I noticed, both in myself and a lot of high achieving people that like, well, sometimes it is, but sometimes there's this disconnect between your brain's perception of your life and like how good your life actually looks. And that feels really challenging sometimes because you're like, well, you can't just make your life look better. Like it already looks great. Like if someone who is really struggling, obviously it's terrible, but a lot of times the solution is like, it's not easy, but it's like, well, if, it makes sense at least that you feel terrible. And I wanted to make sense of this sort of broader aspect of the human condition of like, why is it that like your life can look really great and you can be really smart and successful and yet be stuck in this downward spiral inside of, depression or anxiety. And that to me is like, well, that it's not like a philosophical, I mean, you could try and understand that in a philosophical way. You could try to understand that in a psychological way. And I'm always like, but like what actually is happening in the brain? And for me, learning a lot about that, I found helped with the acceptance piece of myself. I'm like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not being lazy or negative. It's just it's how the brain works.
Unpack that for us then, because earlier you were talking about how you were saying the prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, the striatum. Like unpack that so that if we had a map of the brain right now, and we're like, okay, let's understand this from the inside out, and then we can kind of tease out from upward spiral, like those like kind of tiny or small actions that actually kind of spark the chemical changes for us.
Yeah.
So let's get the baseline.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that because that's actually one of the main reasons I wanted to update the upward spiral and I'm releasing the second edition, which is like, and I read about this in the new preface, is like, I kind of used to have this feeling like, wait, if everyone just understood the brain as well as I did, then they wouldn't have a problem. And what I realized like, no, was actually like implicit of why I found it so important to learn the neuroscience is like, oh, because the neuroscience helped me understand myself better. And the goal of learning about the brain isn't just to like learn a bunch of facts and things. It's like, oh, it helps you learn about yourself. It's a shortcut to learning about yourself. You could spend a year in therapy trying to figure out like, why do I keep doing this? Or you could sometimes learn some like basic circuits of how the brain functions. And you're like, oh, that's not something wrong with me. Like that's just how the brain works. And then from there, then you can understand how your brain works. Because not everyone's brain is as emotionally reactive or as attuned to mistakes or as primed to thinking analytically or whatever. And that's that's one of the main goals of most forms of therapy is that self-understanding. But like, I'm like, oh, learning about the neuroscience, you can get a shortcut in that. But to answer your question more specifically, like, sometimes people wonder, like, why do I, keep doing this thing, even though I don't want to do it? Why do I keep scrolling my phone? I just want to work. I just want to do this other thing. And it's like, well, because the dorsal striatum, the habit circuit in your brain, evolved millions of years ago, long before the rational part of our brain. And it evolved to keep you safe in a complex world. And it evolved on a basic principle of like, well, I'm alive now. So I guess I should just keep doing whatever I have been doing. And so that part of your brain just wants to keep you doing the same things. Another part of your brain, the nucleus accumbens, another part of the action circuit, it wants you to do whatever's most immediately pleasurable and rewarding, because it's like, well, and those two evolve right next to each other. Because like, yeah, just keep doing the same thing unless there's like some food right there or someone to mate with. And we're like, okay, and then you can change the plan. And that is how most animals get very far in life, be very successful. The prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain, evolved millions of years later. And sometimes it, and it's the only part of your brain that cares about your long-term goals or like your long-term happiness. And so whenever something happens, the dorsal striatum, the habit circuit is like, well, let's just do it this way because that's the way we always do it. And your prefrontal cortex is like, yeah, we could. We've been doing that same pattern for like 5 years and it hasn't worked. So let's try doing something different this time.
It's kind of more innovative.
Right. Well, it's trying to focus on your long-term goals. And the dorsal striatum doesn't care about your long-term goals. It cares about what's easiest right now. And then the impulse circuit, the nucleus accumbens, chimes in with like, oh, look, there's a cookie. And like in that conversation, your actions get determined. And so it's helpful to realize that like different parts of your brain evolved for different purposes and they want different things. And so sometimes we're like, why do I feel this way? But I don't know, like with this, what should I do this? Right. It's because one part of your brain really wants you to keep doing the same thing. And it's like, oh yeah, it's great. I just keep doing the same thing. And another part of your brain is like, oh, but actually this other thing is more important to me. And that whole conversation, by the way, between those different parts of the action circuit is modulated by your emotions. So the more emotional you are, whether you're stressed out or angry or excited, well, that just biases the whole conversation away from your thoughtful, analytical prefrontal cortex and towards these, automatic habits or impulses. And so that, like a lot of times when we're like, why do I keep doing this? It's like, well, you're not actually interested. Most people I find when they're like, why do I keep doing this? They're not actually interested in why. The
whys are rhetorical almost.
It's a rhetorical. It's actually a criticism veiled as a question.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You're not interested in the answer. You say the implicit answer is because I'm an idiot or because I'm stupid. Like you don't say that part out loud, but if you just change the inflection of like, I wonder why I keep doing this thing. It doesn't seem like it's helping me. Why do I keep doing that? Well, now you've changed it from a self-critical question or for self-criticism into like a scientific exploration. And guess what? There is an answer. There's usually a very good neuroscientific answer for why you keep doing that. And knowing that answer doesn't suddenly make it easy, but at least means you stop sending yourself into a downward spiral because you're like, oh, I see. Like, I see why this is happening. Okay, like, let me start to change some of those patterns instead of getting stuck in the same pattern over and over again. Because in fact, and this is something I wanted to make really explicit in the second edition, which was kind of implicit in the first edition, was this idea of acceptance and self-compassion. Mm-hmm. That like a huge part of learning about the brain is so that you can stop blaming yourself for things that are just either A, part of a human brain, or B, part of your brain. And that self-criticism is just a habit that is programmed into your habit circuit. And it's doing that for a good reason. Happy to talk more about that. But like, it's not doing it for no reason. It's trying to help you but you just need to realize but for this specific thing that I'm trying to do, like get a new job or go for a run, like that's not helpful. Like it might, but like, so, okay, thank you, brain, for reminding me how this could all be pointless and worthless and of how I'm probably going to fail. I appreciate your opinion. Like, just at this moment, I'm going to go try this little tiny change instead.
It's almost like what I hear you saying is by understanding the physiology of the brain and kind of the tug of war between these different parts, you're objectifying it. And by objectifying it, you automatically have more space because you're impersonalizing it to some degree.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in that space, and now you can ask those different, you can take that question back and ask it not rhetorically, but on purpose.
Yeah.
And get curious about it, which completely probably should. That's probably one of the, I want to shift to the upward spiral. And
but no, I think that is one of the main parts of the upward spiral is this understanding and awareness that automatically sort of leads to like acceptance because you understand the problem better. And like, that's one of those things where I immediately, like, I don't talk about it as mindfulness as much in the book, but it's like,
it's
right.
Awareness.
Right. It's just awareness. You have awareness, and then you have an automatic judgment about that awareness, but that automatic judgment is like, part of a habit, and then you can become aware of that. And like, one of the things that I liked that I really discovered after writing the book was this other piece from acceptance and commitment therapy around, I'm blanking on what they call the concept, but like, not starting from the assumption that you're broken. That like, when you start from the assumption that you're broken and you need to be fixed, like, that's very hard to change. And learning the neuroscience helps with that, because you're like, oh, I'm not broken. Like, even if you're depressed or anxious, it feels like you're broken. It feels like you're missing some part of the brain, or some part of your brain just, one part isn't working. But I've like scanned enough brains of people with anxiety. We've done enough EEGs on people with depression to like know that like, oh, that's just how it feels. It's not accurate. And just learning about that neuroscience of the brain facilitates that mindfulness and acceptance and compassion. And that's why, even though like the first half of the book is focused on like why you're stuck, it really is the first part of the upward spiral. It's just like, oh, right, accepting that it's okay to be stuck in this pattern that you're in, and understanding it is the first part to getting better and breaking free from those same patterns.
Hey, taking a quick break to let you know I've got a new book coming out called Tiny Shifts. It's about how small, intentional shifts in your emotional health can transform your stress, relationships, and even your longevity. When you join the early access list, you're going to get a free sneak peek of the Tiny Shifts mini guide and weekly insights into the top tools and trends in emotional health. Just head to drelishagoldstein.com/tiny-shifts-early. If you can't remember that, the link is also in the show notes below. Now let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, I was, before we got on this podcast, you and I were talking for a little bit, and I have a firsthand experience with this around a similar type of spiral, except for the spiral of insomnia, which is similar to a spiral of depression or anxiety or these different things, and helping me understanding, and what I told you, and I'll just share with everyone here, is me understanding how the brain worked. In the same way that you're talking about it here, help me objectify it enough where I could get some space and make a pivot, to something that I knew would shift the activity in my brain in a way that would help me go to rest. And more specifically for people who do struggle with sleep issues here, there is an inverse relationship between being, let's say, present to something. And in this case, when you're trying to sleep, all you got is your body or your breath. The breath is a little tougher sometimes, but your body's a little more tactile. And when you're able to kind of really stay with that, it has an inverse relationship between the part of your brain that's self-referencing and, just kind of really active in that way. And you want to turn that down, but where the mistake people make, and I imagine they make it with depression too, is they try to think their way out of the issue. And sometimes I give the people the example, like if you're having a panic attack, would you go to a friend who is having a panic attack for advice? No. Okay. So then you don't want to go to your own head for advice in that moment. But
also like when people who try and think, and if you have a really analytical brain, you could know that like, this probably isn't a heart attack. It feels like a heart attack, right? Like you don't think, I'm having a panic attack. You feel like I'm having a heart attack. Yeah. And if you're really smart and you've gone through this rodeo before, you'd be like, well, this isn't a heart attack. This is probably a panic attack, which is helpful to have that mindful awareness, but your brain is very sneaky. Because then it automatically triggers usually that habit of self-criticism or black or white thinking of like, you idiot, why are you so bent out of shape? There's nothing wrong. You shouldn't feel this way. And then like we start to become aware of our experience. And then the moment you start to become aware of like what's actually going on in your body, like in a non-judgmental way, then like, boop, the same pattern. And now you're like, I shouldn't be feeling so stressed out. This isn't a heart attack. It's just a panic attack. I'm weak, blah, 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 blah. And then we go back and forth, but you're like, but it feels like I'm dying. You're not dying. Stop complaining and whining about it. And it's just like, if you're going to a friend, like, would it helpful to talk to a friend who's yelling at you for having a panic attack? Stop complaining. You're not having a heart attack. There's people with real problems here. Well, they might be accurate, but it is not helpful. And that's where, like a lot of my clients, I have coaching clients, and I focus mostly on like, not like clinical specific issues, but just like, when you're overthinking and judging yourself, that like when you're someone who is really smart and analytically minded, we sometimes paint ourselves into a corner because we're like, well, I know that this thing is true, so I have to keep telling myself that. But that's the exact same thing that we've experienced in a friendship where like something could be true, but your friend could be a jerk for like bringing it up over and over again, as opposed to like, oh yeah, that really sucks. And like, that's the relationship we often have wired into our own brain towards ourselves is not one of compassion. It's where the rational part of our brain is trying to overpower or beat into submission the emotional or habit parts of our brain because it somehow thinks it's superior. But like, no, it's all part of the you. They have to be in the right balance. And just because you're like, I shouldn't be depressed. Okay, well, you are. Like,
yeah,
I shouldn't be worried about this. But you are. So like, it's actually, and this is where I found learning about the neuroscience was very helpful for me, because like, oh, it's actually irrational to be too rational. Because it's kind of like, I sometimes use the analogy, it's kind of like arguing with your dog. You're like, well, but I trained the dog. I gave them treats to, get off the couch. They shouldn't be doing this. Like, you should know that you shouldn't get on the couch. Okay, like, you're right. Congratulations, buddy. Pat yourself on the back for how right you are. But like, dogs don't follow the same logic. So like, it's illogical to use your analytical thinking and logic to argue with this dog. And your deeper circuits in your brain are much more like a dog. We don't notice it because like it's all in our head and we're like, this is just me. Like, right. But there are different parts of you because there are different parts of your brain that are pulling you in different directions. And so the analytical part needs to work with this dog brain that just wants to, keep running in the same loop. But you can, if you understand the logic of how that part of the brain works, well, then you can just use treats and repetition to like train that part so it's more aligned with like the long-term goals that you have, instead of just yelling at yourself and getting in a tug of war between these different goals that your brain has.
I might even argue that if someone self-identifies as intelligent and being a wonderful thinker in some way, that they're in more trouble to some degree, because right? Because they're like there's that I shouldn't be. Yeah, I'm so smart. Why am I depressed? Or I'm so, I should be able to think my way out of this, which is implicitly
I feel like I had that issue too. And then I was like, I shouldn't feel, and this like learning about the neuroscience kind of gave me a bridge. Because also for a lot of these things about the upward spiral, we could talk more like gratitude or slow breathing or whatever. I was like, but how is that going to help? That seems dumb or whatever.
Right, exactly.
And like learning, this stuff actually changes your brain. It helps the analytical part of my brain like get out of my own way, essentially.
I think that's been the hardest part about this work for people in our culture in particular, maybe especially men, I would say.
No, definitely.
Definitely, yeah. Is that things like that, like gratitude, such a cliche. And, like mindfulness or treating ourselves with warmth or caring, or, the way it's kind of spelled out is very like, it's very cliche. So it's like, that's just soft stuff. But when we take a moment and just kind of notice that judgment for a second and set it aside, and then I'd like to enter into this upward spiral, these particular things for you, so you can help us unpack just the real practical nature of it, maybe some of the science behind it. So we can kind of set that aside, and we want to, as this quote says, the proof is in the eating of the pudding, to give ourselves the chance to kind of see this for ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so when I'm working with clients, like the first thing I do is just like set up like, hey, you need to understand what's going on. So you stop getting in your own way. That's like the first step. The second step is kind of like some, what I call the dumb stuff. Like it feels like your life is spiraling out of control and everything is terrible. And maybe, but you can't necessarily know, where the source of all of your stress is coming from if you're not taking care of some of the basic things. So there's this like commercial that I always think about with Betty White, where she's like screaming at a bunch of football players, and like someone's like, hey coach, I think you just need a Snickers, and like hands it to her, and she turns back into like the football coach, and he's like, oh, sorry. It's like, because like when you are hungry, it activates your stress response. Like there's a reason why the term hangry came. So your feelings, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're upset, it's valid. It's just, maybe this particular feeling is caused because you didn't eat right. Maybe it's because you slept terribly last night. It's still a valid feeling, but like where it's coming from could be, how did you sleep? Are you eating healthy food? Are you getting enough exercise? Are you getting sunlight? Are you just, interacting with other people? And it's like a lot of this like behavioral activation stuff that I think of as just sort of like, it's just like dumb stuff where your analytical brain's like, oh yeah, but like, how's that going to help? Or we think that like, just because it's caused by this direct biological thing, somehow that like invalidates the feeling. And it's just like a lot of men, if your wife is, on a certain part of her hormonal cycle, if you'd be like, oh, well, you're not really mad at me. That's just your hormones. Like, no, she really is mad at you. The feeling is that part of the reason she may be more reactive is because of the hormones, but like the biology does not invalidate your feelings. It explains your feelings. And some of our biology there's nothing to do but understand it and like, oh, and maybe that's part of it. But a lot of our biology, there's stuff you can do. Like, oh, you should probably go to sleep a little bit earlier, or like not, watch TV right before you go to bed, or like maybe you should move your body. And if you just start doing some of these dumb little things like exercise and sleeping right and interacting with other people, and maybe just like throw in something that's fun occasionally.
Imagine the dumb was in air quotes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if this captures it's just dumb in that it's like, it's not rocket science. And it's the kind of thing that it's probably one of the most common criticisms that I've read about my book. Like when I read the Amazon reviews, people are like, oh, this isn't anything new. Everyone knows you're supposed to like sleep and exercise and eat right. Like, I'm not like reinventing the wheel. I'm just explaining how this is connected to the brain circuits that create depression and anxiety. And sometimes some people are fortunate enough that if they just do these little dumb things, then their problems go away. That doesn't mean their problems weren't real. And that's, but like, if you do all of these things and your problems still don't go away, well, at least now we can know like, well, where is the problem coming from? But also like, even if it like doesn't solve everything, it's still better off than doing nothing. But a lot of people are like, they're trying to look for like, what's the one solution that's going to fix everything? And I tried exercising, that didn't fix it. Right. Exercise probably won't fix it for you, but it'll just make it a little bit easier to go to sleep. And then your sleep will be a little bit more restorative. So it'll be a little easier to have more energy to do activity. Like there's just little tiny changes that cause changes in the brain that make further positive changes easier and more accessible. And so like, that's one of the most important places to start.
And I would even argue the reverse of that, which is like that when you start making these, not even the exercise and the sleep and the nutrition, but when you start being able to differentiate between what's happening in your brain, let's say, and in your experience, so that you can make a better choice, a healthier choice for yourself. And maybe that's just like you were talking about before, self-compassion. I want to hear a little bit more about the science behind gratitude. That changes your physiology too, because your heart rate starts going down, your muscles start to loosen a little bit. That could enhance your sleep. That could also give you a little bit more energy, because you're not draining it through all your worrying and thinking. Right. To be able to say, well, maybe today I can exercise. Right. Or maybe I'll choose a better food.
Because a lot of these
today.
things, like the medical field sometimes makes this tougher, because they're like, well, you have to do these things, right? Like you have to exercise, you need to sleep, right? And that might be true. And it can be true that like, if you don't do these things, then negative consequences will happen. So where a lot of people get motivated to do those things, there's like, well, I just need to focus on all of the negative consequences. And sometimes that can like make you do the things more, but it's really hard to feel calm and happy and satisfied with them, because the reason why you are doing these things is part of what determines their neurobiological effects. Mm-hmm. So like one of my favorite studies is I think it was done on mice or rats. Older rats. Yeah. I always lump them together, but I apologize to any,
They use both pretty regularly.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but like the one study, they took these mice and gave them access to a running wheel. And mice, well, like, you're stuck in a cage. What else you can do is run whenever they want to run. Another group of mice, they stuck them on a treadmill that would just turn on whenever the first mouse started running. So they're both running the exact same amount. And both of them experienced benefits from exercise, increases in like brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which help strengthen neurons, and it's kind of like fertilizer for your brain. And so both of them had increases, but the one that had voluntary running had bigger increases because yes, exercise is good for you, but like you not being in control of it adds more stress, which takes away some of the benefit. And so like when it comes to humans, all your exercise is voluntary, right? Like no one's dragging you through this. But when you go to the gym and you're like, I'm all here because my stupid doctor told me to come here. Like you can pretend like you're being forced to do it. And then you're just, yes. And if you want to blame me for making you exercise, like I'm happy to, I say this to my students all the time, like I'm happy to take that blame because like I do know, yes, that the exercise is generally going to be beneficial for you. But like, as long as you're doing the exercise, just like change your mindset a little bit or what you're focusing on of like, oh, I am choosing to do this because I like to sleep better, or like, I want to have more energy to play with my kids. And these have different biological effects for a very particular reason, I think. It's because it's the difference between running to avoid negative consequences, like running because something is chasing you, as opposed to you doing the one that's the chasing. So yeah, like running away from a lion can make you run fast. But like if all you're doing is running away from lions all the time, like life is very stressful and
wearing
exhausting.
your whole body down. Yeah.
Right. And if you're like, oh, I am doing this, I'm running towards my family, I'm running towards something that's important to me, I'm running towards my happiness, like still the same amount of running, but just like now you get more benefits from that.
I'm gonna make a theory here about this that's sort of potentially unprovable, but it would correlate with the results, which for humans, or maybe for mice too, I'm not so sure, but humans, because we are a bit more evolved as far as neurologically anyway, is when you choose to exercise versus exercise is coming to you and you being forced to do it, you're sending yourself the message that you're worth taking care of. And that message has to have some kind of tangible benefit as far as your own confidence, as far as what you do in the moments that follow. That self-worth index that goes up because you chose to do that. I have to imagine that has an impact on the outcome.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge. I think like there are some similarities in our biology with mice, and then we both have a mammalian brain. For the mice and for us, for the mice, the majority part of it, but also somewhat for us, is like just the control, like not having control over stressors creates problems.
Yep.
But yes, for people, there's this added piece, and I would call that actually compassion, or changing the relationship you have with yourself, of like, are you forcing yourself to exercise because you are lazy and out of shape and you deserve to be punished? Like sometimes the doctors inadvertently reinforce that message, and the goal-oriented part of our brain also reinforces that message. And it's like, well, if I just get mad at myself enough, then I can get myself to do this behavior, and like, oh, great. And then like it comes at the expense of your, satisfaction and well-being. But these deeper brain circuits, like, okay, I don't care about that. Like, and so when you're trying to get yourself to do some of these activities, like go to sleep earlier, or just get some sunlight in the morning, are you doing it to punish yourself and to control yourself, or are you doing it to be kind to yourself? And I like to think of this in the same way that I think of parenting. Like if your kid doesn't want to go to the dentist, you could say, I don't care, this is for your own good. Like, we're getting in the car, we're going. And like, you could get them to go, and you could shut down and ignore their feelings. If you keep doing that over time, by the way, they might stop sharing their feelings with you, which is something that happens in depression. Like, well, you
Your
still
feelings
have
don't matter.
feelings.
Yeah.
Right. You still have those feelings, but you have taught yourself enough times to shut up and ignore your feelings that your deeper emotional circuits are like, well, that's fine. I'm going to still keep having feelings, and it's just going to come out in random ways. Like, why can't I go to sleep, or why do I keep drinking so much, or whatever? But like,
Or it actually has a physiological impact. There's plenty of studies that show emotional suppression has, the stress response that it creates as a result of that wear and tear on our body occurs as a result.
No, definitely. And so, but like the relationship, you could get your kid, do you have a power relationship with your kid of like, I'm going to subdue you and make you do this thing that's good for you? Or is it, oh, yeah, I know, I hated to go to the dentist too when I was a kid. I know this is difficult. I'm not doing this because it's difficult. I wish you didn't have to go to the dentist. Oh, but I know that this is for your long-term well-being. So as the parent, are you doing this? You're not doing it to torture your child. You're doing it precisely because you care about them, and you are willing to endure their temporary discomfort because of that. And if there is actually, because you care about them, there's possibly something that they could say in that moment, like, oh, but I'm sick right now, or like, I broke my leg. Can we just reschedule it? You might be able to be flexible, but like knowing where are your boundaries is key. And that like holding a boundary is not the same as being mean. And so that's where a lot of us have with our holding boundaries with ourselves. Like, I don't know how to hold this boundary without being mean to myself, as opposed to, no, I'm doing this because I care about myself.
Guest appearance for a future episode, Orange J. Sofer, welcome.
Hi, did I enter too early?
Yeah, and this is Alex Korb, author of
Great.
Upward Spiral.
Wonderful.
Hello.
Nice to meet you,
Well, it's
Alex.
funny because like my doorbell rang at the same time that you joined, and I was like, wait, what? That can't be. That's just like. But I was like, wait, how did he ring the doorbell? I was like, no, that's just.
Well,
Your brain always comes up with stories.
Why don't I leave and let you guys finish up, and then I'll come back in at 1.
Okay. All right, that was really cool.
Yeah.
So, Alex,
Great
I'm aware-
marketing. Just
Yeah,
like,
it didn't,
you
I
didn't.
never even knew that could happen. Alex, really great to be with you. I'm also aware of our time, and this was really special. And I wanted to just end with, if someone's listening right now and they're kind of feeling hopeless, what's one thing they could do to help step them in the direction of turning things around?
Yeah, the first step is to just validate that feeling. Just like, yeah, it's okay that you feel that way. This is a natural human thing. Just labeling the emotions that you're experiencing activates your prefrontal cortex in a way that automatically reduces your amygdala's reactivity. So it doesn't solve everything. It just turns the volume down a little bit, which now creates the possibility, instead of just blaming yourself for being weak, now you have the possibility to take some positive action. Like, well, just make any little tiny change that's different than the default of what you're doing now. So you don't have to go for a 5-mile run, just like go for a walk around the block. That's not going to solve everything, but it's a heck of a lot better than sitting on the couch all day. And
creates the spark.
that one little change, your analytical part of your brain will be like, wow, that's dumb. That's not going to solve everything. And your habit circuit, which wants to be lazy, is like, yeah, that's not going to solve everything. And you can just be like, oh, yeah, it's okay. I'm not going to solve everything all at once. I'm just going to make one little tiny change, be a little kinder to myself. Just do one fun thing, hang out with my friends a little bit more, get some sunlight in the morning. I mean, there's many ways to change our biology, but just like making one little tiny change starts to change your activity and chemistry. And then tomorrow or next week, okay, you can make another change. But like when, like in this book, I present this toolbox to people. Sometimes people feel overwhelmed. Just like, oh my God, now I have to change my sleep, and I have to change this, and I have to change exercise. And like, you don't have to do any of this. There's something that's important to you that you're trying to get to. And these are a whole bunch of tools that science has identified that you can just pick up one tool one day and start to change the activity and chemistry of your brain. And then that makes the next change easier and the next. So you don't have to solve it all at once. Just make one small change.
I love this. Thank you so much, Alex. Author of, by the way, Upward Spiral, and the new edition has come out. I will leave all the links to all your stuff below in the description. This was really great. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, awesome. I'm also excited because I get to do the audiobook for the second edition. So I just spent like 3 days. It was exhausting, but I was like, felt meaningful, which I reminded myself, like, oh, why am I so difficult? Right. It's difficult to like sit still and read, but it's sometimes important things are difficult.
Yep. Okay. I look forward to being with you again soon. Thank you so much for your time.
Great talking. Have a good one.
Hey, thanks for joining me on this episode of the Emotional Longevity Podcast. I hope you found it as inspiring and thought-provoking as I did. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to hit like down below, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone you know who could benefit from these insights. Your support helps us grow this incredible community and reach more people who need it. If today's conversation resonated with you and you're ready to go deeper, if you're ready to truly integrate these ideas into your life, I'd love to invite you to join me in a beautiful, supportive community that's doing this transformative work together. It's a space where you'll find guidance, connection, and the tools you need to create lasting emotional health and resilience. Check out the links in the description below to learn more. And before you go, make sure to tune into our next episode. It's one that you won't want to miss. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, emotional health isn't about just feeling good. It's about building the foundation for a longer, healthier, and more joyful life. I'll see you soon.